What's up, everybody? Hey, welcome to another book club night. Almost said Thursday night. It is not Thursday night. It is Friday night. We don't always hit the same nights, just depending on what we've got going on in life. But we are actually finishing up our book for this month. It's called Surprise the World. And so it has been a book all about 5 habits of highly missional people. So it's been an interesting, pretty practical read. And with Ryan and Corey kind of both having different things to do. It's just been Brandon and I for this series, but it's been really good. So tonight we're finishing. We're kind of doing 2 weeks in a row. Last week we just couldn't end up getting together, and so what we decided to do was to do 2 weeks tonight worth of stuff. So we're doing 4 chapters, and again, these chapters are all super basic and pretty practical. So it's not anything too crazy theological with this, but it's been really good. So again, this is last week as a part of Surprise the World, 5 Habits of Highly Missional People by Michael Frost. It's been a good book, so let's talk about it, and then we will also talk about our book for next month. So, all right, Brandon, this one was good. This one was part of the reason we chose this, right? That it was super simple compared to some of the other ones. We kind of coming towards the end of school with all of our kids and all the life and work and stuff. We needed
Yeah.
something really easy. And this one has
Yeah.
certainly been that. Not a lot of depth to it, but a lot of practicality. So
Mhm.
I think I need to look, make sure I'm doing the right chapters because obviously when you read them, they kind of run together after a while. So chapter 5. So we talked about kind of in week 1 to kind of recap it for anybody who's watching. That's the whole kind of idea of Frost's book is to live these what he calls questionable lives, and not like shady lives, but rather lives that draw questions out of other people. So the way that you live your life makes people look at you and say, why do you do the things that you do? Why do you live the way that you live? Why are you do this, that they're asking questions about your life, and that it gives you opportunity to then point to Jesus. And so that's kind of his philosophy and his mindset. And then he walks through these habits that we went through the first two last week, or last time we met a couple weeks ago. And it's bless and eat. And the idea is bless someone and then eat with someone. He talks about how he wants us to do this with both people in the church and outside the church. So not just outside, to where we're not spending time building community within our own body of believers, but then also making sure that we're doing it with people that don't know Jesus as well, not just doing it with people inside the church as well. And so the first two, like I said, were bless and eat. And then the ones we're talking about tonight are listen, learn, and then sent. And then the last little bit's just kind of a wrap up for it. So the second one, or the third one of his habits, the first one for tonight, is this idea of listening. Let me find the right chapter as a part of it. But one of the things he kind of started off with, it was kind of interesting to me, Brandon, was he started off with this idea that that often we aren't missional because of fear and of laziness. And he talks about fear isn't just the fear of, oh, well, what are they going to say, or what am I going to do? It's also just this like afraid of what could happen, or different like that. And then the laziness is sometimes just not wanting to go do the thing. Where do you think you find yourself falling into that? Because I would assume we all do. So where do you find
Hmm.
yourself falling into fear and laziness when it comes to living out your faith? I think maybe more publicly than we probably do
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, probably somewhere in the middle, probably a little bit of both. And I think some of it's just not making it a priority. Um, I think, or maybe it's not recognizing the opportunities when they're there too. That's probably a portion of it as well.
Yeah, that's good. I like what he says in page 58. He says, laziness tells you that you don't have that you laziness tells you that you don't have the time. Laziness whispers to you that you need to take care of yourself first. And
Mm.
I think that some of the interactions I have with people of, well, I need to understand this better, or I need to
Yeah.
have the answers to this before I get into conversations with people about
Yeah.
faith. What if I don't have the right answer? What if I don't have any answer? What if I don't know how to respond to them? What if I'm not prepared? And so
Hmm.
that fear and laziness can build into this inability to actually go out and do the thing that God calls us to do. And I think the way he describes it is interesting, because he talks a lot about it in that it's not about it's such a tool of Satan to like slowly pull us away from that, to where we suddenly just aren't thinking about it anymore. Kind of like you said, like it's just
Hmm.
we miss opportunities because of it. So now, what are some things that stood out from you, kind of in this idea of listening, which is not the fear and laziness isn't really talking about listening. He's talking about listening to God
Hmm.
as a part of that.
Yeah.
What are some things that stood out to you?
And one thing in particular, just the fact that listening is something that needs to be learned over time.
Oh, that's good.
And sometimes when I try to make it a priority, get into the habit of doing it more frequently, like just spending time quiet, just listening, trying to, you know, clear my mind in the sense of distractions and all of that. Sometimes it can be discouraging when there's no reciprocation from
Uh
that or
huh.
it feels that way.
Uh huh.
So I think it's part patience and part learning how that process works.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's just something that you learn over time. You can't expect you to automatically just hear, vividly the word of God speaking to you
Yep.
just because one day you decide, hey, I'm going to listen.
Well, I'm looking back because I feel like this was not the chapter. I don't think he talked about habits. I think the habits one was the last one, but about how long it takes to build a habit. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, that was in the last chapter of the
Okay,
book.
so well, and I think exactly what you said, and we'll talk, I guess, more about that in a little bit, or we'll just reference it now. That he talks, it's a study that someone did, a pretty deep study, and that it takes different. We've always said like, oh, habit in 30 days. Well, the reality is some habits take you months, if not years, to become a habit, to where you don't
Mm-hmm.
think about them; they're just automatic. And some can take you 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And so, but that this is one of those things that to me would, like you said, it would take a long time, not just to build in the practice of
Mm-hmm.
listening well, but like you said, the patience. I
Yeah.
can remember when we were in college, I for one of my service projects I joined the prayer team at DBU. I don't remember exactly. I don't know what it was. I was earning some probably skipping chapel credits or something like that, and I joined this. One of my service projects was for an entire semester. I joined one of the prayer ministries at DBU, and so what we did
I
is
remember
I
that.
was assigned a time, and I would go pray. In this room, they had a room set up. They had all these different things and kind of tools for you to use. They had a chair, had stuff, but they had a book that you could get prompts to pray and different things like that.
Mm.
But the goal was an hour a week, and so I would, being John, I would save all my hour for one time, and and I would go do it. And when I first did it, like the first 2 or 3 times, I 100% fell asleep, like just straight up was out. And it was like you were by yourself in the room, so it wasn't a like nobody
Yeah.
was coming in. Everybody knew that you were there because of you put a note on the door or whatever. And I crashed hard, and I couldn't pray for more than like 5 or 10 minutes like at a
Mm.
time. And then as the semester went on, and I did it more, and I did it more, and I did it more, and then I found kind of a rhythm to it and who to pray for and how
Mm.
to
Yeah.
pray, so that it wasn't just drudging on, but rather kind of building upon itself. What I would find is that after 45 minutes to an hour, I was engaged. By the end of the semester, I'm really engaged in an hour's worth of prayer, which just felt astronomical. And in the same way, I think this listening is the same thing, that for me to
Mm.
sit, and he talks about it in the book, for me to sit is my mind just runs, right? It runs every direction, runs on the things I need to do. It runs on my faults and failures. He talks about that in the book, that sometimes we try and sit and listen to God, that all that we're reminded about are our sins.
Mm.
And that Satan's using that just to try and pull us away from the listening. We want to ask questions, like we just can't listen well. We don't listen well.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
and it's a muscle that has to be trained and has to be developed, and has to be grown. So yeah, that's really good, really
Yeah.
good. One of the things that stood out for me was on page 60. He says, for enthusiastic extroverts, which we both know as me, the thought of blessing others uh, and eating with others sounds great, but the intentional practice of solitude and silence, which is implicit in the habit of listening to God, is a big challenge. Man, that is me through and through and through. And then I loved what he said, and I'll probably write this somewhere in my office, is the evangelical culture of many of our churches has been shaped by the busyness and activism of our contemporary culture, which causes us to associate mission with, quote, doing things. And that is how I feel that culture and work, even good work like church work, just puts us in a corner of busyness. And we've talked about
Mm-hmm.
that for 6 months, right? That we all struggle with this idea of going to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, and we don't just stop. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, I'll tell you, I think about it more, but I don't do it well. And I think that that is continually something that God's reminding me of, is I've got to be intentional about listening and stopping
Mm.
for Him. So
Kind of like when you're driving through traffic. Sometimes I prefer, even if it's going to take me a little longer, just to take the back road, so I'm not just stopped and not
yes,
moving. I just want that progress. I just want to see
yes, yeah,
action. And
yeah.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes it'll only taking you a lot longer to get to where you're going. Similar to this, if you just take your time, you be
Yeah.
patient, you might get to your destination a lot faster.
No, that's really good. That's really good, because I do the exact same thing. I will intentionally
Yeah.
avoid, because that gives that busyness, that stress of the traffic, of the rush, of
Yeah.
the feeling like which lane am I going to be in, and blah 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 blah. Just
Hmm.
driving the back way to my parents' house an hour away is so much more relaxing, and
Yeah.
I'm looking at trees and cows and all the things, kind of the back way. So that's good. Now, what do you? How do you best hear God for you? What is, because he talked about setting to be intentional, right? So again, the book is super practical. So being intentional about hearing
Mhm.
God, and listening to God. He talks about setting a designated time, setting a place,
Mhm.
removing distractions, those kind of things. Where do you best hear God? What does that look like? Is it a room? Is it soft music? Like what is that for you that you feel like you best hear God?
Yeah. I think so. I'm naturally a night person. I'm not a morning person at all.
Mm-hmm.
However, when I think we've talked about this before on one of these streams where I spent maybe 2 or 3 years where every morning I get to work 45 minutes early, 30 minutes to an hour early, and just sit in my car. A lot of times it'd be the sunrise, and I'd put on some either Christian music or vocalist music, just like lo-fi stuff or something, and then just read, whether it's A.W. Tozer book or I went through the Stephen Curtis Chapman biography, just something to get me engaged. And then I'd have some devotionals and stuff too that I'd read during those mornings. But I think that's when in those moments, is when I have realized that I've heard from God the most.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's a challenge because I'm not a morning person, so it's really difficult.
Right.
But I can't I can't get around the fact that trying to do that in the evening or in the afternoon or at night just is not as effective. I don't know why.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, the morning just seems to be where I'm the most attentive to listen.
Yeah.
But it is difficult because, again, not a morning person.
No, that's really good. I feel like a place I've been convicted recently is I've been doing my quiet times at night, like right before I go to bed,
Mm.
and I'm the only person in the house awake. I'm always the latest up at my house, so
Yeah.
I'll lay in bed and read whatever book I'm going through, or from some verses or whatever it is, and I'll pray. And it's kind of the way that I kind of close down my night. It kind of relaxes me and
Mhm.
whatnot. But I feel like I've been a bit convicted of going, okay, so I challenge people to give, like, what is the call when we give? The give is the first fruits, right? So when it's our tithe, we give it before we spend all our money. We go, okay, God, I've got $20 left this month. Here you go.
Yeah.
Um, Rather, it goes, no, 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 I want to give to you first to show that I trust you, and then I'm doing it. And I feel
Mm.
this conviction to go, then why are you ending your, and for me personally, right? I think
Mm.
every person's different. For me, I feel like God's going a bit to go, why are you ending your day with me rather than finding something earlier to start your day with me?
Yeah.
And for me, it's probably not to get up at 5:30 in the morning before my kids do at 6. It may be after they go to school or after I get them all off to then sit and to stop and to, I'm like you, I'm not much of a morning person. So to get up early, I just I won't do it consistently. And so, but to find some time in that. Now, for
Yeah.
me, what's interesting is, so like when I read or when I write or when I'm studying for a sermon or whatever I'm doing, I'm always have music on. Like it helps my brain to focus in on one thing, to have that music kind of focus me in. But when I want to just sit and listen, or what I would say, just like be still, I typically like to do that outside with nothing else. So when we go to the beach for a week for vacation, that's my favorite. Just to
Hmm.
sit on the balcony, not to have headphones on, and just sit and listen to the waves or the wind or whatever. And
I
being
do the same thing.
here, yeah, being here in our new house where we are near the lake, you get some of that same kind
Hmm.
of wind coming off the water pretty consistently, and the breeze and the birds. And so I found myself just sitting outside more consistently at our new house, uh, just having the ability to sit and just to listen. And so I think that's something that I'm going to try and work more on is taking those moments when nobody else is around, nobody else is at the house, and just to
Hmm.
sit and to be still and to listen and to try and spend not 5 minutes doing it, but let's try 10. 10's going to be really uncomfortable for me because I'm the busy person that just wants to move and
Yeah.
wants to go and wants to think and plan and all of that. So,
Yeah. No, I'm the same with time. Like if I try to do it at the house, I'll be lucky to get 5, 10 minutes
yep,
on a street consistently without interruption.
yep,
That was one of the reasons that I used to go to to our
that's
office
smart.
parking
No,
lot
that's really smart.
because I what am I going to do, work instead?
Uh
Like
huh. Uh huh.
that was the
Yep.
only other alternative.
Yeah. Well, and we talk about it too because when you're at the house, like we talk about Chris and I, like, oh, we don't want to go spend money to go on a date and go to a hotel for 2 nights. Like, we don't need that. We go send the kids off, and it's the
Mm,
same thing, right? We don't have kids. Except the reality is, when we're at the house, we look around and we see all the things we should be doing, and so we don't actually relax because all we can
hmm
think about is, oh, well, I needed to paint this room
Right.
6 months ago, or oh, I needed to change the filter in the air conditioner, or oh, I needed to clean out the garage. Man, I really should clean my vehicle because it's the only time I'm going to have with that. And so we need to actually get away.
hmm
Even if our kids aren't here, we need to get away so that we can actually rest. And I feel like that's the same thing with this listening. Sometimes, and
Yep.
just like you said, I need to get away just to be able to do that.
Yep.
So cool. Yeah, so that's the idea of listening. Again, it's something we've talked about for 6 months. I don't think any of us are very good at it. And he talks in there specifically, give yourself 20 minutes because there's a reality to, and I think we've talked about it on this stream before, that it takes time to wind down. When I don't know how long it takes for you, but when I go on vacation, it's by day 3 that I start to
hmm
finally like come off the work kind of mindset. And so but it takes me 3 days. So
Yeah.
I don't enjoy vacations unless they're 5 or 6 days because
Yeah.
it takes me
That's
to
fair.
get to day 3, and then 3, 4, 5 I really enjoy, and by day 6 I'm already thinking about coming back and things we got to do, and kind of that process. And so
hmm
I need that extended time. So this is kind of the same mindset of, it's going to be awkward, but you have to give yourself time to make it work. So
Yep.
cool, cool. All right. So the fourth habit, chapter 6, is learn, which was really all about not just like learning scripture, but specifically getting to know who Christ is. And one of his quotes on page 72 says, we need to know him if we're going to share him as the reason for the hope we have. And so it's this idea of the more you know about Christ, the more that you will begin to emulate him. I love the word that he used a couple of times, to marinate, which is just to kind of soak it in and let it, get deep within who you are, of who Jesus is. But what kind of things stood out to you in this chapter, or maybe just some things, some practical things that you've learned about your own learning process when it comes to Christ and his life?
I mean, just some practical things of not like reading the Gospels obviously is a great way to learn about Jesus. It's all, he's the main focus there. But then also just reading other content, whether that's from other authors or, um, you talked about video series, like watch video series about it, just to consume more content about Jesus and who he was, what he did while he was here, um, his mission here, and all that kind of stuff. Um, yeah, just to reinforce what you know so that you can better communicate that when
Yeah,
you need to.
yeah. One of the best examples I ever had was in seminary. We had a seminary professor that was talking about someone that he looked up to, someone that was a mentor in his life, and he said that he was the most Christ example that he'd ever known. So he asked him one time, "Well, how do you live your life as such a Christ-centered person?" And he said that his that this mentor, and I don't know if it's a pastor or another seminary professor, but that he essentially said he reads through the Gospels every month, and or a book. I think he reads through
Mm,
all 4 Gospels every month, and he'd done it for years. And he said, why? That's the one person I'm trying to get to know better. The only way to do that is to spend time getting to know Christ and getting to know who he was, who he cares about, how he cares
hmm
about him. And so it's just that continual reading of the Gospels. And it really challenged me to go, man, how often do we do that? Do we actually sit, like you said, just read the Gospels? And
hmm
so I've had seasons where I've done that well. Is just to spend more time reading, and not even reading. There's a reality to reading to study, but then there's also just a understanding the story, and understanding the story means a bigger kind of time of reading in one sitting, so that you get the context of all of it together. But you're not trying to get
hmm
any depth. You're just trying to engage in the story of Christ. What did he do?
Yep.
Why did he do it? Where did he go when? okay, so we went to Judea here, and he went, to this part of Israel here. He went through Jerusalem here. Why? And that kind of stuff. So
Yep.
yeah, and I just think it's interesting, and I think too some of it when you said, I don't know if you look through. I know you're doing the audiobook, but he has a list of things in the back of the book that he says st- basically resources for learning Jesus, and so it's different books and
Okay.
different stuff. But what's interesting is I know I've read one of those that I don't agree with theologically. So what do you think the challenge is in reading about Jesus? Like what do you think would be, how do we keep on track with what is scriptural and what is not?
I mean, I think for myself, if I was trying to look for content or books or anything to read, I would probably vet them through people that I can trust their wisdom on.
That's
That's
good.
probably my path, just because I'm not as familiar with authors, Christian authors and theological books and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'd probably vet it through someone else. I know I've reached out to like Jeff Warren once before, and he gave me some context or some suggestions for like commentaries and things. Yeah, that's probably my approach.
Yeah. No, that's really good. That's really good. One, yeah, I think that's really good. And I think too, as we study, if we always kind of go back to scripture, there are things in there, or even especially movies, because he lists several movies. And movies always take their own kind of personal
Yeah,
spin on stuff
right, right.
and creative direction. And that's not like inherently sinful if you're not going completely off the rails. And
Hmm.
I've never watched it, but The Chosen is everything I've heard is it's excellent. Well, it takes its own creative direction. It's not, these are not every
Yeah, it
conversation
fills
that
in
they
the
do.
gaps that
Right,
are
it fills
not
in the gaps that are not in scripture.
specifically pointed out yet.
But the point of it is to try and show the humanity of Christ
Mm.
and just kind of the real person that he was. And I think that that's a really cool thing. I think too, some of it's just talking with people. We've talked about some of these other books to go, hey, I don't know if I agree with that statement. And then let's talk it out because
Yeah.
I'm a little curious. And I feel like the Holy Spirit does that. That the Holy Spirit gives us our own discernment. Helps us to discern things that are or are not true, or just flags that
Hmm.
maybe make us question things, which, even if they are true, help us to understand why that's the case. And so I think that that's a really good thing. But I mean, I
Hmm.
think that with this one specifically, it just goes to, you're talking about Jesus. The goal of this book is to help us to find practical ways to live questionable lives so that we can tell other people about Jesus. Well, you can't tell them about Jesus if you don't know about Jesus.
Yeah.
And the reality is, who Jesus was, what he did, what he said should influence everything that we do, from the way we live, the way we talk, the way we work, the way we lead in our families and in our workplaces and our lives, the way we vote, the way we, like, all the things should be guided
Mhm.
through the lens of Christ. And so that to me is a really important one. And that's probably the one that I do better than the others as
Yeah.
a pastor. It's a little bit easier to do better at that one. So, all right. So, habit 5, chapter 7 is being sent. Is to identify yourself as a missionary. Now, have you heard this phrase? All believers should see themselves as missionaries,
I don't think so. Not in that way, I don't think.
or that we're all missionaries. I know
I
you've
mean,
heard
I'm
that
sure I've
because we
heard that
went
at some
to
point,
because we
yeah.
went to high school. We were in the
Yeah.
same church in high school, and I remember hearing that, and that
Yeah.
became really popular. I actually disagree with that statement. Total side tangent, not a knock on the book in any way, shape, or form. But at our church, we have several relationships with missionaries that we support, and so we have 12 at our church. So
Hmm.
one of them is a good friend of mine, and we're in a small group together while he's back in the States, him and his family. And talking about it, this phrase really frustrates him because his point is we aren't all missionaries. Now we should all be missional, and that we are
Yeah.
called to do mission work and to be on mission, and that mission is to teach and to disciple and to share the hope of Jesus. But a missionary is specifically someone who's called to go to a different culture,
Hmm.
um, to share the news of Christ. And so, and it's the same thing with pastors, right? That I've also heard the phrase, well, we're all pastors and
Yeah.
preachers. And like,
Pastors
as a
of our
pastor, that's not
family.
true. Right. That's not true. Like, yeah, you're a leader, and God
Yeah.
calls you to live a
There's a
certain
vocational
way.
aspect to it.
Right. But for the vocational aspect, I totally get it going, no, you're not. I'm the one
Yeah.
who who's been called to do this day in and
Hmm.
day out with my life. Very specifically, when I didn't do it, I felt lost a bit. And when I am doing it, I feel complete. Like it's a clue what God's called me to do. So,
Yeah.
anyways, total side tangent. Just a little nugget there. But like 2 sentences later, he says, but it does mean that every believer, it says every believer isn't a gifted evangelist. We talked about that. But he said it does mean every believer needs to take seriously his or her calling to alert others to God's reign and rule. And again, it just goes back to this Matthew 28, the Great Commission, is all of us, right? That
Hmm.
it's not to just the disciples, it's not just to pastors, it's to, as believers, as followers of Christ, we are, um, Christ tells us to go, therefore, teaching and baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey all the things I've commanded you. And so we're supposed to share who Jesus is with the world around us. So yeah. So what do you think the biggest? And I know we talked a little bit about this, but how has this book kind of challenged you on this idea of being sent, right? As an introvert, as someone who's a believer, but is not
Hmm.
a gifted evangelist, of which I know we talked like neither one of us are. How have you? How has it challenged you to feel like you are being sent, called to go? I guess.
Yeah. I think it's in some of these things, like in the chapters that we read recently on this portion of it, it's pointing out the gaps that I have to allow me to be comfortable in doing that. So things like listening, learning. I feel like if I put more effort and priority into those aspects, I'm going to naturally feel more comfortable. It's like if I learn a new skill for my job or something, yeah, I may know of that skill and know tiny pieces of it, but I'm not going to make a presentation about it because I'm not qualified to do so. But if I do all the research, I learn and I spend time really engaged and focusing on it, I'll be comfortable doing that. And if somebody asks me, hey, what do you think of this, thing, then I'll be comfortable talking about it. So I think it's just trying to build up those habits like he talks about.
That's really good. No, that's really good. And I think it's just being intentional to not be comfortable.
Mhm.
I think as American Christians, as Western Christians and as middle class people, that we just, life is all, our culture is all about comfort, and not in a, comfort comes with safety and provision for your family and all of that kind of stuff, but that God calls us to live more than comfortable when it comes to our faith. And I think that sometimes the culture of comfort seeps into my spiritual life. And I get
Yeah.
comfortable, and comfortable turns into ineffective. And, uh, and so I think that that's what you're saying is right there with me too. Now he talks a bit about journaling in this. Are you much of a
Mm.
journaler? Have you done it in the past? Do you like it? Do you hate it?
I do like it, so I don't do it near as often. Now, again, during that span when I was more consistent, that was one of the things that I would do. And I was out, I had a prayer journal. I would just journal thoughts that I had, what I thought God may be telling me in that time, and I feel like I got a lot out of that, um, and I enjoyed doing it. But again, like a lot of this, it's like making a priority, making time to actually do that. That's the struggle.
Good. I hate journaling with a passion. I
Yeah.
I don't. I know that probably shocks you. I just can't. I'm too impatient for journaling.
Yeah.
Like I don't. I've tried paper. I will do it.
Mhm.
I have a journal that I looked back on the other day. It was a prayer journal, and it was really good early on. And it was like 3 days in a row, and then there's a week, and then there's 2 months, and then
Mhm.
there's just nothing. And I got like 6 days into the scripture thing that I was doing. I just cannot find, and and I think it's important. I think it's something I need to do more of.
Mhm.
I just I love. Okay, so I'm in a kick these days. Right, I'm a super tech person, right? But I'm in a kick these days of everything being tactical and kind of there's a word for it, but like in your hands. And
Mhm.
so my notebook that I carry around with all my notes is a notebook. I still can't do a
Yeah. Yeah.
calendar. I've tried. I can't do a calendar. I can't do a paper calendar. But my notebook for my notes when meetings and whatnot is literally a
Mhm.
notebook, and I've got page numbers at the bottom, and I have a table of contents in the beginning, and I can jump over to pages, and like that is my thing, and I have to be very careful not to lose it. But I love that all my books now are paper
Yeah.
books, my
Yeah.
commentaries, my Bibles. I just find that I retain more, and engaging more with
Mhm.
actual kind of tactile things, but when it comes to journaling, I cannot sit and write. My hand gets tired.
Yeah.
My brain is moving too fast
Mhm.
for me to write. And so I don't know what to do. I don't know. Should I just sit and should I type stuff? But then it's like typing out a letter
Doesn't feel
to
like you're
someone.
engaged in it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like typing out a letter to
Yeah.
someone like,
Yeah.
"Oh, thanks. I'm so glad you typed this
Yeah.
out." That said how much this means rather than writing it down. So, um,
Right. Right.
I don't know what the
No,
best
I
answer for
totally
me is,
understand that.
but
I totally understand because when I first started doing it, um, did yeah, I initially and naturally I'm not really a journaler, but grew to love it during that time. But yeah, I started off, it was not great, just kind of spouting off some things. But as I progressed and did it more frequently, I started to get more comfortable slowing down, and my brain would work a lot faster than I can write too. I'm not a fast writer, and my brain would want to spit out these thoughts really quickly, and I couldn't keep up. But I actually found myself um, eventually thinking more deeper into what I was writing because I had to force my brain to slow down and think about each thing that I was writing down. And I feel like that made it more um, beneficial doing it that way.
that's good.
I just feel like I got more out of it.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think that's exactly what he's saying about the listening, right? That it's a
Mm.
habit you have to build and it's muscles you have to train. But what you said is exactly what he said, that over time you do, and then you can see the benefits of it.
Mm.
So, all right, well, one day,
Yep.
one day. I got a lot of other things to work on. One day. That'll be
Yeah.
towards the end of my process of writing. Maybe one day. So, one day. Okay, well, cool. And then the last chapter was really just kind of, it was like 3 pages long. But he talks about discipleship, nurture, and accountability, what he calls the DNAs, and it's just this idea of that we are meant to be discipled, and so he talks about kind of a DNA group, a group of small people, which was cool because as we're talking about this, it's literally what we decided to do this year with this book club.
Yeah.
Is that we knew that this would help us to grow in our faith, and so we decided to do it, to read a book a month. This idea of nurturing, we've been really good going, hey, I can't meet this week or I can't do it this week. Life is just too crazy to not go, oh, well, you're a terrible Christian. Jesus hates you and so do I.
Yeah.
But go, okay, cool. Well, can we do it another time? Do we just need to skip you for this week? No, I mean, that's the whole reason Ryan's not in this month, right? Is that
Mm.
it was just, life was too crazy to go, okay, cool.
Right.
Skip a month. Like, it's not the end of the world. We'll be here. We'll be ready to jump back in June. And then the accountability, which, you know, that's so I've just learned the importance of that over the years, to know that we're gonna have to talk about this, that I have to get my stuff read and ready
Yep.
for us is good. And I was meeting with my pastor yesterday, and talking about one of the things he challenged me last year when I moved in this new role, his executive pastor role, was to read more because he knows I'm not a reader. I can't say the last time I finished a book before this year, other than the Bible. And he's just like, you have to read. Great leaders are great readers, and you have to read more. And I was telling him yesterday, I said how much I've enjoyed reading, and I've got a list of like 8 to 10 books that I'm just saving in Amazon, going, okay, when we get done with this one, I'm gonna jump into this. Then I'm trying to think through like what it
Hmm.
looks like for me to keep reading a book a month for the next 10 years. I mean, this year I will already have finished 12 more books than I did in the
Yeah.
last probably 5 years combined. Much less in 10 years when I'll be 100 books or 200 books or 300 books. Maybe I go to two a month. Like, it's just that accountability has turned into something that I've really enjoyed. So
Yeah.
cool, cool. All right. Anything else you got on the book? Maybe one thing. There was one quote that I need to text to our staff, but what was kind of one big kind of takeaway you would have from the book in general?
Yeah. So I tried to think back after the last chapter, just kind of reviewing in my head all the five habits and my feelings towards that after reading all of this. And I think I came away with a few things. I think one, it's overwhelming trying to implement those things, especially
Mm-hmm.
those first two. With
Mm-hmm.
me being more introverted, the giving, not as much the giving, but the eating.
Right.
With just and trying to find people to do that with, and all that goes into that. So just overwhelming in general, but understand the necessity of it, and then the fact that it's some of these things do put me well outside my comfort zone. So
Mm-hmm.
learning how to become comfortable in those positions, in those situations. I think those are a couple of things that I took away, and then just overall understanding that the importance of these things, the importance of listening and learning, and um, yeah, just good reinforcement for that.
That's good. No, it's really good. And I think you talk about being overwhelming as I look at all five of them, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't do any of these well except maybe learning. And I can still be better than that. I can't, I'm not going to just suddenly start listening, journaling, blessing, eating like all in one week. And for
Mm,
me, it is, I think the, the eating, but like branching out to new people. I think that's my big thing that I'm challenged with. And then it's just this idea of these questionable lives. I love
yeah.
that mindset that I want my life to be lived in such a way. And as a pastor, I've had these conversations with people that, you know, whatever they're in a conversation, they're cursing or they're doing this, they're doing that, and they find out I'm past, they immediately apologize. And
Hmm.
just the door that opens often to go, listen, no, it's fine. Like and you're fine. My kids aren't around. Like it's not a big deal. Don't bother me. This,
We've
that,
seen that
but
on
that,
Warzone.
yeah, yeah. To be able to have these conversations is really fun and enjoyable. And my hope is that by building more relationships, that I will be able to show people that I'm different more. And my big thing is I have to build more relationships with people. I just feel like that's something God's challenged me to do. And not people in the church, in my church specifically,
Hmm.
but people outside. What am I doing to build relationships with people in the community? With people at my kids' school, with this or that. What am I doing to intentionally do that? And I think that's something that I've been really challenged with. Again, it's not the first time, but God has just really reminded me to go, you've got to branch outside the crew that you are with now because that's your comfortable crew. And I need those
Hmm.
people around me, you guys and my accountability group and my life,
Hmm.
my small group at church. I need these people. But if that's all my life is surrounded by, then I'm in an echo chamber of believers and Christians, and I've got to branch out from that to be effective in sharing the gospel. So
Yeah, that's good.
cool, cool. All right, man. All right. Well, hey, I appreciate it. Again, next
Yep.
month. So that was that book. Next month, we are going to be starting a new book, which I'm like super excited about this one. But it's called Why Do I Do What I Don't Want to Do? I'm having to read this backwards on the screen. I don't know if it's backwards to you or not,
No,
but
it's good. It's good.
okay, good. Why do I do what I don't want to do? And the idea is it's this pastor who's down in Waco, down near Baylor. His name's Jonathan Pokluda, and he is going to talk about replacing deadly vices with life-giving ventures, or sorry, virtues. And so the deadly vices. I want to see. I haven't actually opened up the book yet, but I heard him on a podcast and just was like, this is something that I desperately want to read because it doesn't just sit there and go, hey, these are the sins you shouldn't be committing. But he goes, no, 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 these are the sins that you shouldn't be committing, but here's how you replace that in your life. You can't just go, don't do this because that doesn't work. How do you replace it? So, pride, anger, greed, apathy, and lust. Those are the 5 chapters. And so, for that, oh, no, it keeps going. Perception management, entitlement, busyness, drunkenness, and cynicism. Okay, so it's gonna be
Sounds like a fun
convicting.
book.
It's gonna be good. We may take this over a couple of months. We'll see how this goes because this one could be pretty intense. So we'll see how it goes. But we'll start
Yeah.
back up next week as a part of it. So cool. All right. Well, hey, I appreciate everybody for hanging out with us, especially on YouTube if you're watching back live or later. Again, we'll be back next week talking about Why Do I Do What I Don't Want to Do by Jonathan Pokluda. You're welcome to read this book with us and join us in on these conversations. It's a great chance to kind of grow and be challenged in your faith, or just join us each week for these conversations, whether live or later on YouTube. So again, I appreciate it. Appreciate you hanging out with us. Appreciate you having conversations with us. We will see you next time. Okay.